Hello and welcome to the Data Diaries podcast. This is a show where we discuss all things data through first-hand experiences. This is our live show following our first topic, neurodiversity in data, where I'm joined by Nick, Joulie and Mark. I think it'd probably be best to go around and sort of introduce yourself. I mean, not everyone has probably catched every single podcast, so it might be good to introduce each person in order. And so we'll probably go in podcast order. If you want to go first, Mark, and introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi everyone. I've spent my whole 25-year career as a data person in lots of different companies, including McLaren and the F1 team and BA and Tesco and Schroders. And I've got various autistic and ADHD family members and colleagues and traits of both of those things myself, but I'm not diagnosed with anything. That's me.
Thank you, Nick. And Nick, do you want to take on?
Yeah, hi. I am Nick Walker. I'm the principal data engineer and the BI at Donnell. I have been working in data for 15, 16 years now. I'm also a co-chair of the Neurodiversity and Disability Group at Donnell. I'm also massively ADHD. So, yeah. Hello.
Perfect. And Joulie, do you want to finish up?
Of course. So Joulie Gindi, and that we're using years, 20 years in data, of which 17 is in consulting. And I work as a BI analytics solution architect, or BI Swiss knife, as I've been known in other places. I am diagnosed autistic, but just about a year ago. And as I'm exploring the world around me, I'm also reflecting around how I managed people throughout my career, how I was managed. And luckily, I worked in different cultures, which kind of allows for more diversity and inclusion. So yeah, so all of that together.
Perfect. And I did realize that wasn't in podcast order. So I think some of my potential ADHD was kicking in there where I was looking at Nick and immediately went to Nick first. But I think that nicely enters into our first question. So a little bit of premise to this question is I actually listened to Nick's podcast and drew this question out of there because I thought it was particularly good. So I think it'd be great to maybe recap for some of the people that haven't listened to that podcast yet, as well as any new listeners. So to start off, what advice would you give leaders who are looking to understand neurodiversity and want to start the journey of being more inclusive to neurodiverse individuals? And if you want to take off, Nick, first.
Sure, man. The biggest part you can do is stop reading, start listening. I've tried to word this about 7 different times. Just stop reading, start listening. It's great to be able to go and read Wikipedia or BBC articles or LinkedIn articles about it. But actually, if you've got someone sitting in front of you who's neurodiverse, talk to them. Ask them about what their life has been like. Ask them what work has been like. Ask them what their experiences are. And then actually listen. Listen empathically when it comes down to this. You may not truly get it, but understands that what they've experienced is very much the way they probably see the world. They probably got a lot of defensiveness. They probably got a lot of loudness, like I have, when it comes down to these things. When you get to experience, or at least be empathetic to the experiences of a neurodiverse person, you kind of get your eyes open to the rest of the world that may or may not be there. It doesn't just count for neurodiverse people. It can be anyone, really. But it's listen to what they're saying, listen to their experiences, listen to what they need. Some people may say, actually, I really need dedicated time in my day to go and walk off and do whatever I need to do. I need to burn the energy up that does build up in me, or I need to wear a headset that allows me to block out all sounds. Listen to what they do, so it literally equips you to be able to go, okay, I have a person with ADHD, dyslexia, ASD, whatever it happens to be, and be able to take that forwards with that and take that knowledge with them. But don't just not do that. Like, go read Wikipedia as well. Like, there's loads of great stuff and loads of good resources out there. Like, learn, be mindful, be curious about it. Like, there's a ton of different ways that we show ourselves.
Amazing. And Joulie, did you want to carry on if there's anything to add there?
Sure. Totally agree with Nick. Definitely listen. It's so funny when organizations hire people who are not neurodivergent to tell them how to treat people who are neurodivergent. What's that about, right? I mean, who's going to know better than the person themselves? Not just with neurodiversity, with any way of working, with different cultures, different languages, anything, not just neurodiversity. Talk and listen to your people. definitely promote awareness. That's really important. I would encourage that through events, through podcasts like this, through people sharing their lived experience. But then take action. It's one thing to raise awareness. It's another thing to take action. And a lot of organizations are very good at raising awareness and saying, yeah, we want to be inclusive. Yeah, we want to do this. We don't know what to do about it. And that becomes a very, almost a disabling point for people, because they join an organization which is raving it's inclusive, but it's not really doing that. So definitely work on that through training, through adjustments, through policies, through fostering acceptance, getting leadership to advocate and lead by example. So people like Mark, people like Nick, people like myself, or CTOs or CIOs talking about neurodiversity, talking how it affects them or their family. That is fostering acceptance and advocating by and leading by example. Allies, and always remember, it's a journey. So don't think, okay, we did this, this is enough. We did this much, this is okay. No, as this journey continues and intersectionalities play in, you will be challenged over and over again.
Amazing. I think, leaders as role models for neurodiversity is particularly important. But over to you, Mark, and sort of finishing up that, if there's anything to add.
I think, as well as all those points, actually, there's an idea about how you manage your people, which doesn't need to depend on neurodiversity, which is just to understand each of the people that you manage as individuals, and not just, what football team they like, but what way of working do they like? At what time of day, in what environment, with what structure gets the best out of them. And the thing that makes your life hard as a manager is to embrace the fact that that is different from person to person. And managing a team that leans into and harnesses those differences requires you to have a slightly more complicated structure than everyone working exactly the same way at the same time in the same place. But if you want to get the best out of people, you use them as individuals. And I think the other reason why that's important, I'm sure we'll come back to this topic, is that there are lots of neurodivergent individuals who won't tell you. They may not even know themselves. But if you just treat every person as an individual, understand them as an individual, you'll get the best out of them. And in particular, neurodivergent individuals benefit from that approach.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, moving on to the next question, I think we obviously in the podcast, we've had a theme of trying to highlight the strengths in neurodiversity in particular, but that's not always the case, particularly in certain organizations. So I think leading on to the next question, what bad experiences do you think neurodivergent people may experience at work? Joulie, do you want to take us on that?
So speaking on behalf of neurodivergent people I worked with or I've witnessed myself, I think the biggest issue is bias. And that's why a lot of people, when they come to disclose, they're worried, but what will happen to me if I disclose? Sometimes even after people mention to their family they are recently diagnosed, that triggers different reactions from family. So definitely bias. And bias is not something that we consciously do. It is part of the human brain that has evolved through the years, and it kept us alive many decades ago, many centuries ago. But that part of the brain, we can't just eliminate it. However, it plays over and over again. So things like that can show like standards of politeness. So I recall we were in a meeting and we had a colleague who said, "Oh, I have a question." And straight away they were told, it was a few years ago, straight away they were told, "Oh, we were really running out of time, so please be careful how much you ask." And at the same time, nobody was reminded of the time. So at the end of the meeting, I took the meeting organizer to a side and I said, and she's a lovely person, I'm sure she had no intentions of being biased or anything. And I said to her, the colleague who asked about the question, why did you say to her she has to be careful with the time? You didn't say that reminder to anyone else. Yeah, but usually goes on. And I said, but we had enough time. We actually finished 5 minutes before the deadline. So why was it that person specifically? Would you have challenged me with that kind of question, with that kind of comment? And that's when she realized, oh my God, it is unconscious bias. I said, would you have challenged the head of the department with that kind of question? And that's when she realized again. And then she was like, oh, I didn't realize. And I said, it's okay. That's why it's called unconscious. But if you do it again and again and again, that's when it becomes a problem. But the first time, as long as someone points it out, it can go. So things like also standards of politeness, things like expected common sense for someone who has dyslexia, they might get lost in their own house. And we should not hold that against them. It's how their brain works. It's creative in other ways, but obviously not with directions maybe. Tone or misunderstandings due to lack of tone of voice or the tone of voice being used. Things like social isolation, things like bullying, lack of adjustments, or even forced adjustments. Like, I'm going to send you meeting notes because you definitely need meeting notes. But I didn't ask for that. So things like that. I mean, let's acknowledge the elephant in the room. It's almost like telling someone, we're giving you adjustments and accommodations. It's like we're giving you a ramp, you're on a wheelchair, we'll give you a ramp. It's 45 degrees angle, but we gave you a ramp and we did our job and get on with it. Now you do your job and go up that ramp. And the elephant in the room is, this is employment discrimination. There is no way around it. So finally, the stress of dealing with all of this leads to the final element, which is mental health challenges. Because people think autism or ADHD are directly linked. No, they're not. It's all these environmental factors around people that push them into the last challenge, which I see as mental health.
Definitely.
That's
I think, yeah, no, I think as well, people probably on the lower end of the, I suppose, the corporate hierarchy might be a little bit more susceptible to that as well, which is something to consider. But yeah, Nick, did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, spot on with what you just said, actually. Bias very quickly turns into judgment. And then folks like myself, I'm senior leadership. I can get away with murder. I can walk into boardrooms with a tiny little clicker and it's absolutely fine. The issue is when you're a little bit lower on the old corporate totem pole, you can be...
Or you have an intersection.
Yeah.
Or you have an
Yes, very
intersection.
much so.
You're something neurodivergent and a woman, or neurodivergent and you have another disability that is visible or invisible, and all these intersections as well.
Very much so. And it's what comes up to that then. It becomes really super problematic because you get the judgment from that. You'll get a director, a partner, whoever it is sitting there going, oh, can you stop being so childish? Can you stop playing with the cube or something? Actually, no, this is good for a billion different reasons. You want me to concentrate. Let me just sit here clicking whatever it is. I know it's moderately annoying. Deal with it. The other one is itchy feet. I'm full of energy. I'm always off normally on meetings. There's a reason this is wireless over there somewhere talking, or if I'm in our main office in London, I'm walking around. We've got walls to draw on. Fantastic, because it gets all that energy out. I can't just sit there staring at the screen. But in some environments that's frowned upon. Don't do that. Show us just from a laptop. Show us this screen. Show us this diagram. That doesn't necessarily work. That ways of working. If you try to challenge that, it goes from the bias of they're a bit strange to very quickly, oh, it's this guy again. And it's that judgment will just kick your ass if you're not used to it. And it will very much, you end up masking, trying to hide who you are, trying to work the same as everybody else. You end up trying to figure out how to be like everybody else. And you end up with, to Julie's point, mental health problems and depression, constant anxiety, worry about perception, all sorts of things kicking off. So yeah, these are experiences that I've had. These are literal conversations I've had.
Yeah, a little bit too real, but I think, Mark, have you had any bad experiences or seen anyone else that you know?
So, yeah, no, a few people have told me some stories. One in particular, a colleague who's reasonably senior, so he manages a data team, and he came to discover through the lockdown experience, which I think is quite common, that change of our working environment opened a lot of eyes to some of these ideas. He came to realize that he had ADHD. He got a diagnosis. He takes Ritalin. It makes a huge difference to him. And he told his boss this as well. And there was, a month or so later, there was a meeting where there was a debate about some important discussion something to be decided. And it was him and his boss and several other people. And in this discussion, his boss said, "Oh, you're just saying that because you're impulsive because of your ADHD, and sort of literally dismissed his contribution to the meeting because of that. And it's interesting. That is probably, I mean, it's akin to something that probably happened quite a lot 30 years ago, which is some man dismissing a woman's contribution and saying, "Well, that's because you're on your period," or something like that. And it's as appropriate and as supportive, and it's completely outrageous. And so definitely, I know a few people have been burnt by having told people that they have a condition, and then that's thrown back in their face as a result of the ignorance and or the biases of those people.
That actually perfectly segues into our next question, actually. So if you are neurodivergent, should you tell your manager that you have a neurodivergent condition?
So yeah, this is a huge dilemma, and I think the things on the other side of the scales are telling somebody that you have autism or ADHD activates important legal protections. It is in law; they are protected characteristics as disabilities. Interestingly, you don't actually need a clinical diagnosis for that legal protection to be true. But it, from a sort of documentary evidence point of view, it definitely sort of eases things. But the other thing that gets activated by you saying, "I have condition X, I would like accommodations," is you have now put into the head of everyone who's in the circle of knowledge of that, all those biases and assumptions that are in those people's heads. And so that friend's boss had some misconceptions, particularly about what the behaviors of somebody with ADHD who is on medication. Like it's my son has medication; he's like a different person. He's the non-ADHD version of himself. But regardless of that, there are lots of people whose perception of these things is informed by nothing particularly, or the sorts of things on television and in movies, which is almost always completely underrepresentative. Because if there's an autistic character in a TV show or something, it's the version of that is either very outdated because the understanding of autism has shifted a lot over the decades, or is the version of it that makes for good drama, which is not the reality of it. So that is the dilemma.
And stereotypes.
Yeah, all the stereotypes. And my general advice to people would be to not tell people unless you are pretty sure that the person you're going to tell will handle that sort of information well and would be sympathetic. And if they have somebody who, you've got an autistic child or something, that they've got that sort of understanding. But it's that's why sort of getting the education out there is so important. So it's a real dilemma, and you can't get the best of both, really. So most people I know with ADHD or autism, they keep it a secret and they haven't told anyone at all, or maybe just their boss, but in a very sort of selective way.
But Julie, what do you think about that?
I'm actually very refreshed by the fact that Mark is the only person I ever heard saying "do not disclose," and I'm so grateful, Mark, about that, because organizations are always saying, "Disclose, let us know how we can help you, let us do this," and it's so scary when people actually disclose what they're met with. Sometimes, not all organizations do it wrong, but a lot of them, when someone discloses, they're like, "Oh, okay, what do we do with this?" It's kind of, I don't know, we're kind of legally held accountable, but we don't know what to do. So I actually wholeheartedly agree with Mark. And I think the decision to disclose is a totally personal one. So if it's safe for the person and the environment they're in to disclose, then totally go for it. But sometimes those environments, they're not enabling the person. Sometimes people disclose and even their family or culture or environment would not be enabling them anymore. Sometimes straight away, their traits would be used against them and they would be put on performance management issues and so on. And it's interesting because when we know someone doesn't have a trait that we perceive as a trait we don't want to deal with, we're willing to train them, we're willing to work with them, we're willing to guide them, but we become slightly a little bit less tolerant when they have mentioned that they have a reason for that trait. And let's face it, I mean, again, back to unconscious bias, we can't put all the blame on on the people receiving the message, because in the UK, and I mentioned this in my book, it's from one of the autism reports that came out recently, Neurodiversity. In the UK, 3/4 of HR personnel have not received any form of neurodiversity training. That's shocking. 3/4 of HR. How are they going to deal with the people they're hiring that are neurodivergent if they don't even know what neurodiversity is, the strengths, the challenges, and all of this? And it's great to sell all the positives and say, oh yeah, neurodiversity is great. You get superpowers, but there are also challenges there, and you can't expect people to come to the table with one and leave the other behind. It's the same person.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Nick, what do you think?
Echoing most of the comments more than anything. For most folks, it's if you feel safe to do so. If you can look at your boss and say, this guy, this gal ain't gonna judge me, go for it. Like if you're comfortable, if you're psychologically safe, if you're in the right space and mind for that, do it. If you're not, keep it down. Like spot on with the HR thing. There's just not enough training that goes on, and it's very often it's dismissed as, oh, it's complicated, or it's very wide spectrum of things. And spectrum's an awful phrase to hear get banded around all the time now, but it is very much it's ADHD, it's ASD, it's all these things. I'm only here for the technical components of my job. No, you're here to lead people. You need to know this. You need to understand this and support this. And businesses, organizations collectively need to get better at dealing with that. The reality is as well, like you do end up with leaders like myself who are very loud about the fact that they have it. And I use that as I
like leaders who are colorful. You're a colorful, vibrant.
No, I like loud. I'm loud. I'm very loud in person. Booming voice. I'm loud for a particular reason. Like, I've been the dude who's misunderstood. I don't want anyone who reports up into my crews, my tech leads, principals, heads of, anyone around me. I don't want anyone to ever feel like they have to hide any part of themselves. By being that loud, I've had more people come to me and say, I've got this thing. Can we talk about ADHD? Can we talk about ASD? Can we talk about dyslexia? But I don't really understand it. Like all I do is I look at Wikipedia and I'm a bit, cool, talk to me. It kind of forces that safe space into an area that probably didn't have it before. It kind of puts the flag down and says, tough, this is what we're going to talk about. This is going to be the hard conversation. And you're going to be safe to have that hard conversation if you want it. It doesn't force you to, but it's if you want it. It's there. Feel free to approach. And I think it's something that senior leaders who probably are on the neurodiverse space journey, whatever it is, we could speak up about it and say, actually, you can forge that safe space in one simple thing, just going, that's me, come talk to me.
No, I would definitely agree. Maybe to flip it around to the other perspective. So if you're maybe a neurotypical manager, what are some strategies to manage an ADHD or autistic team member, or maybe even yourself? Joulie, do you want to start from perhaps the autistic perspective?
Sure. So I think it really depends on person to person. Again, the first step I would say is ask the person what kind of accommodations they need. Don't assume, don't hire someone who doesn't know anything about the subject to tell you about the subject. Some accommodations that I've seen work for me and other colleagues, for example, are things like flexible working times and locations, especially if they have hyper focus, because you might be so into something, you end up working, 28 hours on it, and you finish kind of a week's worth of work in those 28 hours. We had a colleague once who stayed overnight in the office, and we found him the next morning there. So, and he was focused on something. So the humane thing to do was to tell him, take the rest of today off and go sleep, because you obviously worked overnight. Things like direct and clear communication. Now, there's a very big difference between that and hostile communication. So when people say, can you be direct with me? They're not inviting anyone to be hostile with them. They're just asking you to be direct and clear. It's very different. Things like clear deadlines. I have a colleague with ADHD, and she always says, if the deadline is a week away, don't tell me it's a week away. Tell me it's tomorrow. I work better that way, and I'm likely to meet the deadline. So tell me a week earlier. And being autistic, I struggle to lie. So a lot of the time when I have to do it, I stutter or I talk in a funny way. And then she just looks at me and she says, it's not next week, is it? It's actually the week after. Okay, but you said to tell you this. So I'm doing my best here. And last but not least, also physical work environment. So, for example, a lot of people on the spectrum, they have hyper or hyposensitivity, as Mark mentioned in his podcast. For some of us, for example, we see light 40% brighter than others. So that's excruciatingly painful. So being able to dim the light, or being able to sit somewhere in the office that is not as noisy, or having the option of headphones or whatever works for you. Exactly. Whatever works for you. These are small physical accommodations, colors around the office, so people know which section or department they're in and not constantly be lost in the different areas of the office, things like that.
Amazing. And Nick, did you have any perspective from the opposite side, from the ADHD side?
The good thing is a lot of the ASD and ADHD stuff goes together really, really well. The direct communication part, some people do take that as I just need to be really blunt with you. No, you just need to be straight to the point. This needs to be done by X for Y so Z can happen. Grand. I know the whole system. I know the system. That's good. That's really, really good. Like managing an ADHD employee is about sometimes, especially for me, I can look at my to-do list. I looked at it this morning and panicked slightly, but it's one of those understanding and empathize what that actually is. It's very quickly to go, oh my God, I am not doing enough. Panicking about that and getting into a bit of a shame spiral of you should be doing more. And then you end up working 28 hours, staying in the office a lot. Been there, done that, got the t-shirt, it's grand. But it's kind of working with them. That's either half an hour's on a Monday and a Friday. What have we achieved? What do we need to do? Understanding that my calendar will occasionally look like a kaleidoscope of colors because it's how I manage my time, or it's booked out. And then if it does say like on a calendar, please don't book this, don't. It sounds really that, but that's my focus time. That's I'm putting my headset on. I'm either in the office or I'm at home. Teams isn't on, Slack isn't on, don't talk to me. Like I need to get down to be able to do these things and understand that that's a different way of work that actually is perceived to be quite hostile, is perceived to be quite and very misunderstood. Where it comes down to that, and it's actually no, you just need to get the graft on when I work best. I just need to be the best part of that. So it's that kind of understanding that yeah, some of us work very, very oddly compared to some other people. Roll with it. I'm a morning person. Let me do my work in the morning. By 4:30, I think one of my old bosses called me a pumpkin. 4:30 comes completely useless to everybody. But that's an ADHD thing for me. I'm just one of those. So it's about if you're managing someone like that, it's understanding that it isn't just his ADHD person is in this silo. It's all the different bits. It's more like Kaplunk. You've got to pull the red ones out and the blue ones out, and then another person has yellow and green ones. Roll with it, understand it, empathize, and really listen to what this person needs from you as a leader, and go with that, support them with care, nurture and protect.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually the opposite. So I don't think my brain really switches on until 10, and then I can stay up for as long as I want. But yeah, Mark, did you have any? Obviously, you've got sort of feet in both worlds a little bit. But yeah, what were your thoughts?
So I mentioned in my podcast a little mnemonic for the things that capture our attention and in a sense naturally activate people with ADHD. And in many ways, it sort of helps make sense of a lot of the strategies you've already heard, which was NICE, N-I-C-E, novelty, interest, challenge, and emergency. And yeah,
Nice.
the dysfunction of ADHD is an inability to do things that are not nice. So, but that gives you the keys to all this. Like, okay, don't give that sort of person, a repetitive task. Invite them to automate it. If somebody's particularly interested in a certain thing, well, that's going to be naturally activating of them, and they'll thrive at it. Challenge isn't interesting because to be challenging is to be not too easy, not too hard. So you've got to kind of calibrate the tasks of the person, the stage they are in their skill, and then emergency. I mean, that's why the deadlines, discussion with Joulie was so important. I get things done when it's an emergency. Yeah, the true deadline is the one that evacuates me. So I think that's a useful structure. And then on autism, I think actually I was in an autistic colleague and I were talking to somebody, and we were describing the things that help get the best out of an autistic person. And we suddenly realized that we were describing the things that the practices of Scrum and Agile in software development, which has got a kind of clearly explicit diarized moment when you plan everything very explicitly, everything is crystal clear. There's a diarized moment when you have, in a structured way, have a discussion about what could be done better, and then agree what you're going to do. And meanwhile, there's this person whose job it is to defend all the people from interruption. So social ambiguity is something that autistic people don't handle well, and interruptions and sort of state transitions are really difficult for people with autism. And all the practices of Agile embed that. And it wasn't designed with autism in mind, but it's no doubt deeply true that it got the best out of a lot of software developers who happen to be autistic. So, and actually, the three people who've ever enthused to me about autism, all three of them I now know to be autistic. When they first enthused to me, none of us knew that. But I think there's something about the Agile and Scrum that really, gets the best out of people.
That's interesting, and that's probably linking all of our podcasts together. That's why there's autistic and ADHD people are drawn to the world of data and drawn to the world of sort of technology because of these things that perhaps are a little bit subconscious, but cater towards the neurodiverse. So on our final question, time has actually flown by, but keeping with you, Mark, if we had a time machine and we could go into the future, what do you think the end goal of an openly neurodiverse workforce would look like?
Well, I mean, what exactly it looks like, I don't know, but I guess I'm extremely energized by the idea that my kids can grow up in a world where they can tell their colleagues that they have ADHD and autism, and that causes their work to be more fulfilling and their relationships to be better and excellent. And that's quite a contrast with the point I made earlier that I generally keep it secret. So I want us to be in a world where they can say that, and it would and they'll benefit from it. And it's the understanding in the heads of the people they would say it to that is going to be the gateway to that. And
Nick, what were your thoughts on that question?
I'm quite it's quite a glib answer. I'm very Star Trekky, actually. I like the idea that in the future, sort of distant future, it isn't even spoken about. It's just we're all different. We all come in every shape and size, every neurodiversity, every race, color, creed, whatever it is. Doesn't matter who, doesn't matter what, doesn't matter what for. We just get the accommodations that we need. We don't have barriers in front of us. We don't have ceilings above us. We can get on with whatever it is we want to get on with, whatever we want to achieve. Nothing should stand in the way of that that can't be changed, that can't be helped, that can't be moved out of the way. Like, we should just be able to get on with that. It's quite a glib answer. It's quite a nice fluffy one, but I think it's something really utopian and optimistic to actually look forward to in a slightly more darker world than usual.
Yeah, no, I would agree. It's almost where we can get to the point where it's not spoken about, so that we, that's where the end point is, where it's just normality, where I think a lot of these things end up. But yeah, Joulie, what were your thoughts?
I mean, I agree with what Nick and Mark said, but yeah, I think the exciting point would be that people think of it as a norm, not necessarily something that's a barrier or something that you should treat with less dignity. So just a norm, the same way we have language diversity, the same way we have hair color diversity, the same way we have diversity of choice. There is cognitive diversity, and it doesn't mean someone is less or an other or should be treated any different. They're just part of that. And we're starting to do progress in this, but I hope instead of spending most funding on finding out why people are autistic or how people get ADHD at birth or if it's hereditary, or don't spend money on these things. Please spend money, or even money spent on making people less autistic or less ADHD. Spend that money in helping these people thrive. Spend that money in helping them excel and bloom rather than burn out, mask, and go through mental health issues. Help integrate societies together so nobody is left out of this. And it's just a cognitive diversity. The same way I speak a different language, or the same way I like to eat vegan or whatever, it's just a cognitive diversity.
Amazing. Well, I think maybe open the panel up now rather than sort of picking on you individually. But how far do you think we are? How far are we away from that sort of normality? I suppose.
If I can make a point, I was trying when I was talking to somebody about how safe it is to tell somebody, say, that you're autistic. I found myself trying to link it to something that sort of feels similar, and what occurred to me was, in terms of if you are gay, telling your colleagues that you're gay, it feels as safe as doing that in the 1990s, or 30 years ago. I mean, if you watch episodes of Friends, it is full of gay characters, and they are always the punchline of the joke, and so it's just not safe. But where we are now, like same-sex marriage is in law, it's very normalized. And I saw a fascinating article that looked at societal changes in attitudes to things, like about drugs or euthanasia or same-sex marriage, and many societal changes in big, profound sort of moral topics like that change because the younger people have a different view than the older people, and eventually the older people die and the younger people, there's a growing cohorts of people with different views. But in the attitude to same-sex marriage, that isn't what happened. The main thing that happened within each generational cohort, people changed their mind. And my hypothesis is that is the cumulative effect of people coming out. There's people who say, I think homosexuality is evil. I love my son. My son has just told me he's gay. Actually, okay, I'm going to hold on to I love him and respect him. I'm going to change my view about homosexuality. And so I think that's the journey that we will go on over. It will take a generation or two, by people getting to the point where they can tell each other that they have ADHD, they have autism. And then the people around them will come to see that those are strengths just as much as they can be difficulties. But it will take a long time.
Yeah, I would. It's a long road, but hopefully, the more conversations we can have about it, the more that we can do this type of thing. Hopefully, we can contribute to it in a couple of ways. And I did say the final question, but I suppose if maybe people are listening to this and are starting to, like I did, I think when we first had our conversation, Mark, started to put pieces of the jigsaw together in your head, saying, well, maybe this is all sounding a bit too familiar. What would be the advice on getting a diagnosis?
I let the others answer first, I think.
Question?
It's a tough one. Yes, go and do it if you're comfortable. Yes, go do it if you're comfortable doing it. If you're going to go to the NHS, bless them, they're struggling with capacity. Like, you may get a letter back that says, we will see you in 2036, and you go, about it. I know there's grumbles about private stuff, but like, if it's impacting you, if it's something you desperately want to know, something you think you need to know because it's that bit at the back of your head, go do it. Like, go do it. And if it comes back, you don't, fine. Keep pursuing and figuring out who you are. That's the best thing about being a person. Like, but if you genuinely are sitting there saying you want to get diagnosed and everything, like, go do it. Go do it properly.
Amazing. Julie, did you have any sort of final thoughts on that?
Just definitely what Nick said about getting it done. Even if you have just a thought that maybe I understand some of this stuff and I don't know why I think that way. It is well known that a lot of people are underdiagnosed. I know there has been other things on the media about overdiagnosis, about ADHD and other things. But as we stand in the most recent report, 9 out of 10 autistic people over the age of 50 remain undiagnosed. Now, imagine the hardships those people had to go through, the lack of support, everything they had to go through. Before I was diagnosed, I had someone in my team who was in his 50s. And I remember when he got his diagnosis in his mid-50s, he was showing me the diagnosis and he was crying, and I said, why are you crying? At least now you understand how you think, how you can manage this, how you can manage things, what makes you work better, what makes you work worse, what makes you less efficient. And he was saying, no, because I wouldn't have got divorced, I wouldn't have lost contact with all my children who are married with kids now and my grandchildren if I knew this maybe 20, 30, 40 years ago.
That's something spoken about by psychologists and psychiatrists about it. One of the first things you'll figure out is, God damn it, all the things I could have done differently. The regret that you get from it is painful to kind of work through, to go through. It's not regret for I'm happy in who I am, but it's, God damn, I could have done so many things different. I could have done better at school, could have like gone to university, could have done something different, followed a different life, stayed married to whoever was married to. Like, that regret is a real painful thing. And I guess because we've spoken about the mental health thing, that it doesn't normally get the same kind of treatment, but like therapy is a great thing to go through with that. That's a hell of a thing to find out about yourself. No one should do it alone.
His mid-50s, and after he lost so much, but trying to be positive, I said, hey, you have the rest of your life ahead of you. You have this now. Try to build on that. So I really don't think people are, I know the media makes it sound like we're over diagnosing people, but I think we need to take a step back and remember females are less likely to be diagnosed than males for autism. I don't know for ADHD, but I know for autism that is the case. We need to think about things. When I mentioned to my family I have autism, they're like, no, you lived your whole life. You were fine. Why did you get this now? And I said, no, you don't get it. I always had it. No, but you don't have anything. Look at us. We're all fine. And I was like, yeah, guys, actually, I think you're both on the spectrum too. But I'm not going to insist you go. I mean, one has a PhD and a postdoctorate and all of this. Come on, you don't do all of that easily. And unfortunately, even the diagnosis letter, the first sentence on it for me was, we're sorry about how gender biased this process was. I didn't even mention anything, but that's how they realized that they underdiagnosed females.
Wow.
There's so much medical stuff that's set up for white guys. Like, no one else, like, it sucks.
I'm not interested in trains. Okay, I was interested in airplanes and sharks, but and I can tell the airplane models whenever I'm consulting and traveling for work, I'm like, oh, we're getting on at this, we're getting on at that. But that's not normal for other women or for girls. They might be interested in painting their nails in a specific way. They might be interested in sorting out their dolls in a specific order. So they're not going to show the same typical or expected traits. And unfortunately, that means there's a lot of underdiagnosis rather than overdiagnosis. But I don't know about ADHD, so I'd love to know what Mark and Nick have to say about that.
I was going to say, Mark, this might be pertinent to your, because your daughter might have...
I mean, I think the evidence is clear. Well, the proportion of the population that receive a regular prescription for ADHD medication is about 1/20th of credible estimates of the number of people who actually have ADHD in the population. So there is no way ADHD is being overdiagnosed, in my opinion. And of the various people I know who have got diagnoses of either, the only people who've ever felt any negativity about that is being like your colleague, a guy who was quite, around 50, and he regretted not having known it earlier. But everyone, for everyone, it's to know this about yourself and forgive yourself. All those things you found weirdly hard in your life, it can only be a good thing. The other reason I've heard people hesitate to seek a diagnosis, other than the fact that it's going to be administratively irritating, is that they feel like it will suddenly trigger HR knowing and then all that stuff that we were alluding to earlier. But that is not how it works.
Their driving license. I heard that as well.
It's in your hands whether you tell your company that you have this diagnosis from your GP or wherever you got it from. That's it's a whole different thing. So it's, how can it not be a good thing to know these things about ourselves? Having the whole of society understand all the richness of that will take time, but we'll get there.
Amazing. I think, and I mean, I think that's a great point to probably end on, because I think we could probably talk about this for many more hours, but I think LinkedIn will eventually cut us off. So probably best to end it there. But I just want to say a big thank you to all three of you for, first of all, jumping on the podcast, spending the time talking to us, and obviously doing this live event as well. And would like to say, if there are any people watching who are looking for people to come in and speak to their own workforce on neurodiversity, I don't think you could get much better than the three here to go in and then have a chat about it. So very much thank you. And again, if anyone's listening, follow the Data Diaries. We'll be releasing more, and we'll release the recording after this as well. But thanks everyone for watching.
Thank you.